Something far more insidious than high interest rates is infecting the American housing market right now. And if you own a rental property or are sitting on a massive amount of accumulated equity from the last 5 years, you have a limited window to act. This isn't just a cooling, it's a regional collapse, a deep and irreversible correction tearing through the cities that were once called safe bets or pandemic boom towns. Forget the national headlines about moderate gains and stabilizing rates. Those headlines are a gentle lie masking a brutal truth. The American real estate map is being redrawn by 3 unforgiving forces: unsustainable affordability, localized economic fragility, and an accelerating climate insurance crisis. The national average is a statistical illusion. The real pain is hyperlocal, and in certain cities, the floor is about to drop out. Millions of homeowners and investors are about to watch their biggest asset leak value, not because of a stock market crash, but because the basic math of homeownership in their city simply does not add up anymore. We're talking about cities where the rent no longer covers the mortgage plus the new sky-high insurance, where the job growth that fueled the boom has evaporated, and where new inventory is flooding the streets while buyers have vanished. The time for denial is over. This is a critical intelligence briefing. By the end of this script, you will know the exact data points, the inventory surges, the price cut percentages, the local economic weaknesses that mark these 7 cities for a value collapse in 2026. This isn't just about avoiding a loss. It's about selling your rental or primary home now, before the panic fully sets in and the correction becomes a rout. Your goal is to redeploy that capital into a market that is not standing on quicksand. The most powerful psychological trigger in the world is the fear of loss. You worked hard for that equity. You cannot afford to let it disappear because you held on for too long. The market is giving you a warning shot right now, a chance to get out at a price that still looks healthy before the deeper, structural problems become widely recognized. We're going to start with a city that symbolizes the failure of the sun-drenched fantasy, a place where a double-digit price decline is already baked into the next year's forecast, primarily because one core auxiliary cost has made the entire proposition unviable. That city is number 7 on our list, and it is the beginning of the Great Correction. We are talking about Cape Coral, Florida. Now, Florida has long been the escape route for wealthy Americans fleeing high-tax states. It was the land of endless growth, but the new reality is a fiscal and environmental disaster. Cape Coral, specifically, is projected to see a staggering 10.2% decline in median sales prices in 2026. This is not a modest dip. This is a full-blown collapse compared to the 2.2% national average gain forecast. The decline is not driven by typical recessionary pressure. It is driven by the fact that the cost to hold the asset has become financially suicidal. The primary villain here is the insurance crisis. In Southwest Florida, insurance premiums have not just risen. They have exploded, soaring over 300% in many areas since 2020. Major insurers are fleeing the state, leaving homeowners stranded with only the state-backed and increasingly expensive Citizens Insurance, or worse, none at all. A $3,000 annual premium just 3 years ago is now routinely $10,000 to $15,000. When a $300,000 mortgage payment looks manageable, but the $1,200 monthly escrow for insurance and property taxes becomes $2,500, the affordability ratio is instantly destroyed. For rental investors, this is the nail in the coffin. A rental pro forma that once provided positive cash flow is now running a negative $500 a month. Tenants are not willing to pay rent that fully covers the new, inflated insurance cost, so investors are selling, and they are selling fast. Cape Coral's weakness is compounded by an oversupply, especially of condos, which are being hit hardest. The forecast shows an 8.9% decline in nearby Northport as well, signaling a regional rot along the Gulf Coast. The time to sell your rental in Cape Coral is when you can still find a buyer who hasn't fully factored in the true, uninsurable cost of ownership. Once that grim reality becomes a non-negotiable part of the public narrative, your property value will be irreversibly reset to reflect the new, sky-high cost of risk. The money you lose by waiting will be far greater than any perceived gain from another year of rent. Sell before the wave of panic selling that is already starting becomes a tsunami. The key takeaway for Cape Coral is that the market is no longer dictated by demand, but by unmanageable ancillary costs. It's a structural failure. The collapse in value isn't limited to the coasts. In fact, some of the most dramatic collapses are forecast to happen in the very heart of the country, in the metros that became symbols of the new American job and population migration, places where the market was artificially inflated by remote workers and corporate relocations, and where the economic foundation simply cannot sustain the current price levels. This brings us to city number 6 on our list, a place that defined the phrase housing bubble during the pandemic, Austin, Texas. The Austin narrative was the perfect blend of tech enthusiasm, low taxes, and boundless opportunity. Homes appreciated by over 60% in a 3-year period. But that growth was entirely debt-fueled and speculative. Now, the music has stopped, and the data clearly shows a massive oversupply problem combined with a sudden cessation of the high-income buyer migration. While the national average inventory sits around a 3-month supply, Austin has consistently been tracking near a 4.8 to 5.2 month supply of active listings. The surge in inventory has been relentless, up over 26% year-over-year. The builders who rushed to meet the unending demand are now trapped, sitting on massive backlogs of completed and soon-to-be-completed homes that the current market simply cannot absorb. And what happens when builders panic? They slash prices and offer massive incentives, which, in turn, devalues every existing home and rental in the area. We are seeing average price cuts hitting the 20% mark on the median home price in parts of the Greater Austin metro area. For a rental investor who bought in 2021 or 2022, you are now competing against desperate new construction discounts while facing a crushing rise in property taxes. Property taxes in Texas are notoriously high because there is no state income tax, meaning the burden falls heavily on home values. Even as your property's market value starts to decline in 2026, your tax burden may not immediately follow, creating a painful squeeze on your cash flow. Furthermore, Austin's economy, much like Seattle's, is dangerously dependent on the very tech sector that is now contracting. The same companies that brought thousands of high-wage earners, Tesla, Oracle, Dell, are now tightening their belts. Layoffs, hiring freezes, and a shift back toward less generous hybrid or in-office policies mean the influx of high-value buyers has slowed to a trickle, and in some demographics, has reversed entirely. The narrative of Austin being an unbeatable market has shattered, replaced by the reality of a speculative market drowning in overdevelopment. If you own a rental in Austin, you must recognize that your primary buyer pool, the investor who believes the growth will resume, is now gone. The only buyers left are those looking for a deep discount. Your best course of action is to sell now, while your equity still looks strong compared to the peak, and before the thousands of new homes currently under construction further saturate the market in the back half of 2026. The collapse here is a predictable consequence of unsustainable growth and aggressive building, and the market is about to severely punish those who hold on to the belief that this temporary boom will somehow return. The contrast framing for Austin is that the Silicon Hills dream has become a tax and inventory nightmare. This is the first of many Sun Belt cities that will learn a painful lesson about what happens when population growth outpaces true economic stability and long-term affordability. We are now heading north to a market that serves as a perfect demonstration of how the affordability crisis bleeds from the major metros into the surrounding, once sleepy regional hubs. This is a crucial case study in economic contagion, and it brings us to city number 5, Spokane, Washington. Spokane is a classic example of a market that was never truly meant to sustain high prices but was driven up solely by the overflow of West Coast tech wealth. When Seattle and Portland became utterly unaffordable, the buyers and investors, seeking a perceived bargain and proximity to nature, drove prices up in Spokane by over 50% in a few short years. The average salary in Spokane, however, could not justify a median home price that approached the $400,000 mark. Now, the tech industry layoffs in Seattle are sending ripples all the way across the state, and the lack of high-wage jobs in Spokane itself means there is no local buyer base strong enough to catch the falling prices. The most telling sign of trouble is the inventory spike, combined with the sharp deceleration of sales. Spokane's listings have nearly doubled since the pandemic low, meaning there is a glut of homes available, but the crucial factor is the time on market. Homes that once sold in a matter of days are now lingering for 70, 80, or even 90 days. This slow, painful stretch on the market is the precursor to a collapse, as sellers eventually cave, leading to rapid price reductions that then become comps, lowering the value of every home on the street. The psychological shift is dramatic. Once sellers realize the bidding wars are gone and they are now competing against their neighbors in a race to the bottom on price, panic sets in, accelerating the decline. Furthermore, Spokane faces a fundamental economic challenge. Its primary industries, healthcare, manufacturing, and education, do not generate the high salaries required to support current home valuations. Without that high-income local buffer, the market is entirely exposed to external financial shocks, which is precisely what the 2026 forecast predicts. The lesson here is simple. If a city's housing price growth is faster than its wage growth, a collapse is inevitable. Spokane's collapse will be slower and more painful than a sudden coastal shock, characterized by a slow, constant bleed of value as prices are gradually reset back to a level that local wages can actually support. If you own a rental property here, you are facing a period of stagnant or negative returns for the next 3 to 5 years. The prudent move is to sell now, while you can still convince a remote investor that the bargain still exists, before the regional economic malaise fully settles in. This is not a market to hold and hope. It's a market where the fundamentals are actively working against your property value, marking it as a critical exit point before the collapse becomes too widespread to hide. We must continue to follow this trail of economic contagion as we shift our focus to a market that was a beacon of rapid job and population growth, but is now confronting a severe affordability ceiling, leading to an exodus of the very population that fueled its boom. Our journey continues from the collapsing periphery into the core of the problem, where excessive growth meets an absolute affordability limit. This brings us to city number 4 on our list, Raleigh, North Carolina. The Research Triangle area, encompassing Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, has been a darling of economic growth for years, fueled by major tech, pharmaceutical, and financial services companies. For a long time, it offered the perfect balance: high-quality jobs, strong university systems, and relatively affordable housing compared to the Northeast. However, the secret is out, and the success has become the seed of its downfall. Raleigh's median home price appreciation became one of the fastest in the country, but local wages simply could not keep pace. Now, the affordability wall has been hit hard. The forecast for 2026 is projecting Raleigh to see one of the steepest declines among the 50 largest metropolitan areas, with an estimated drop of over 3.7% in median price, driven primarily by a massive shift in market dynamics. The key indicator here is the aggressive surge in housing inventory, paired with a significant slowdown in migration. We are seeing listings up year-over-year by nearly 35% in some segments of the market. What this means is that the homes are sitting. The high-end, luxury listings that fueled the boom are stagnating. And as homes sit longer, sellers panic, leading to higher price cuts. Raleigh is now firmly in a period where buyers have seized control. They have time to be picky, and they are demanding deeper and deeper concessions. The competition among sellers, especially investors who jumped in to capture the rapid appreciation, is fierce. The contrast here is stark. Raleigh was sold as the Goldilocks market, not too hot, not too cold. It's now becoming the stagnation trap, where prices are too high for local buyers and the rush of out-of-state buyers has ceased due to high interest rates and the simple fact that the perceived bargain is gone. The city's growth model was predicated on an endless supply of affordable homes, which is no longer the case. The cost of living advantage has evaporated. For rental investors, this shift is critical. You bought into a momentum play, believing the wave of migration would never stop. Now that the wave is breaking, you are left holding an asset with high carrying costs in a rapidly decelerating market. The best time to sell your rental property in Raleigh was 6 months ago. The second best time is now, before the negative price drops turn into widespread, self-fulfilling prophecy. Once the narrative shifts from Raleigh is a strong growth market to Raleigh is correcting hard, the capital flight will accelerate, making your exit window much smaller. The move must be swift and decisive to beat the crowd. Continuing our tour of collapse, we turn to the markets that were supposed to be immune to correction, the very high-end coastal strongholds that were believed to hold value no matter what. This brings us to city number 3 on our list, San Jose, California, the very heart of the Silicon Valley machine. The prevailing belief has always been that wealth generated by big tech would provide an impenetrable shield against any housing downturn. This belief is proving catastrophically wrong. The San Jose metro area is not just seeing a moderation, it's seeing a structural reset forced by 2 major events: the consolidation of the tech industry and the final, devastating impact of remote work policies. While San Jose's median home price still sits north of $1.2 million, it is projected to see a significant median price decline, likely exceeding 4% in 2026. But the real story is the volume of price cuts. Over 35% of listings in the Bay Area are seeing price cuts, and the length of time properties are sitting on the market is at a knee post-2008 high. This shows profound buyer reluctance. The high-income tech workers who used to drive bidding wars are no longer willing to tolerate the egregious prices and the crushing tax burden. Why pay $1.5 million for a fixer-upper in San Jose when your high-paying job is now fully remote, allowing you to buy a mansion in Boise or Austin for $700,000? This geographic arbitrage is the silent killer of the Bay Area housing market. The jobs are still there, but the workers are not obligated to live there, and the housing market is reacting accordingly. For rental investors, the risk is compounded by California's notoriously stringent renter protection laws. You are holding a highly-priced, high-tax asset with a dwindling pool of stable, high-income renters. Furthermore, the tech industry itself is maturing. It's moving past the hypergrowth phase and into a cost-cutting, efficiency-focused phase, leading to mass layoffs at major companies like Meta and Google. The wealth generation is slowing down just as the exodus is speeding up. San Jose's collapse is the definitive proof that even billions in tech capital cannot overcome the fundamental forces of supply, demand, and lifestyle choice. If you own a rental in San Jose, your priority must be capital preservation. You may never see the peak 2022 prices again, and every month you wait increases the risk of a deeper, faster decline. Sell now, redeploy the capital into a high-growth, landlord-friendly state, and save yourself from the financial slow burn of the Bay Area. The contrast frame for San Jose is that the tech wealth shield has become the remote work liability. The very thing that made it strong is now the reason for its weakness. We have established that high growth and high cost are the 2 primary ingredients for an inevitable value collapse. But there is one final, terrifying ingredient that marks the next city on our list for utter financial devastation: the total collapse of the single industry foundation. The city we must now discuss, number 2 on our list, is a perfect illustration of what happens when a community stakes its entire financial future on the volatility of a single commodity: Pecos, Texas. Pecos might not be a familiar name to those outside the energy sector, but it was ground zero for the Permian Basin oil boom. It exploded in value during the oil surge, offering the promise of easy money and instant wealth. The median price for a small home ballooned as energy workers, contractors, and investors flooded in, believing the high oil prices would last forever. The problem with commodity-driven markets is that their housing value is directly tethered to the price of oil per barrel. When the price dips or stabilizes below the profitability threshold, the job demand disappears instantly, and with it, the housing demand. Pecos is projected to see one of the most dramatic percentage collapses in the nation in 2026, with forecasts exceeding 12.5% decline in home value. This isn't a correction, it's a structural reversal. The moment oil companies cut back on drilling or investment, the temporary workers pack up and leave. When they leave, the rental demand vanishes, the man camps empty, and homes that were bought for inflated prices based on high rental yields suddenly have no tenants and no buyers. For rental property owners, this is the worst-case scenario. You are left holding an asset that not only lacks appreciation but also generates zero income. Furthermore, the infrastructure in Pecos, schools, roads, utilities, was never built to sustain that kind of explosive, temporary population growth. As the boom recedes, the municipal tax base shrinks, leading to a decline in the very services that make a community livable. Selling a rental in Pecos now means accepting a loss from the peak, but holding onto it means accepting a near certainty of zero demand and zero income for the foreseeable future. The decision is simple: salvage what you can now. The final city on our list, number 1, represents the ultimate failure of local governance, affordability, and economic diversification. It is a city that has struggled for decades with population loss and structural unemployment, and it is now facing a devastating wave of foreclosures and investor flight that will wipe out decades of accumulated value. That city is Greenville, Mississippi. Greenville is projected to face the most severe percentage collapse, with forecasts nearing a shocking 17.8% decline in value in 2026. This collapse is fueled by long-term structural weakness that the rest of the country is finally seeing. Greenville's economic base has been slowly eroding for years due to changes in agriculture and manufacturing, leading to a steady outward migration of its most productive workers. Now, with the national economy tightening, the credit risk has soared. The lack of job growth means there is no influx of new, stable buyers to absorb the inventory. Lenders are tightening standards, and the area is ripe for a foreclosure wave that will depress prices for all owners. For a rental investor, this is the deepest trap. You can sell now and capture some marginal remaining value, or you can wait and watch your property become the next distressed asset sold at auction. The truth is, the American housing market is not one entity. It is a mosaic of hyperlocal economies. The 7 cities we discussed, Cape Coral, Austin, Spokane, Raleigh, San Jose, Pecos, and Greenville, are not just correcting. They are suffering from fundamental structural issues: climate risk, oversupply, tech contagion, affordability limits, single industry reliance, and structural decline. These weaknesses mean their recovery will be slow, painful, and measured in years, not months. The window to sell your rental properties in these areas is rapidly closing. Act now to preserve your capital and redeploy it into markets that are still built on stable, diversified foundations.